Let's bring our unit of study of the French Revolution to an end now with a quick discussion about Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon, who announces in 1799 that the revolution is over. He himself takes on the role ultimately of a monarch after a revolution to remove a monarch. So the revolution ends in 1799 when one moderate faction of the government known as the Directory attempts to overthrow another moderate faction. Now, worried that their plans of takeover may not go as smoothly as they hope, this group invited Napoleon Bonaparte, a successful military officer, to be on the sidelines in case they needed his help. The grand strategist that Napoleon was meant that he saw an opportunity in this. And when the coup attempt started to go off the rails, Napoleon himself steps in and takes power. And of course, proclaims a new government with himself in charge. He calls it the consulate. And of course, the person in charge of the consulate, that'd be Napoleon, would need special emergency powers because there's people trying to take over the government. In an emergency like that, who better than a military man to keep everything calm and under control? Now, it's interesting, therefore, that the revolution ends with a military officer who had risen through the ranks from the Third Estate, a Corsican, Italian by birth, not even French, taking power and becoming actually a monarch himself. One of the questions of the French Revolution is, did it come full circle? Have we got a new king? Was the revolution all for nothing? In this image, we see Jacques Louis David in one of his initial sketchings of a famous moment in Napoleon's life. This role Napoleon took, called consul in the time of the consulate, was that of a dictator, and he'd taken the idea from ancient Rome itself. In 1804, as David is recording here in this etching, as he planned for a magnificent artwork, Napoleon takes the crown out of the hand of a pope and crowns himself Emperor of France. So this artwork here is Jacques Louis David's sketch. It becomes the basis of a famous artwork, which actually features in a Beyoncé clip. It was an affront to the Pope that he took this power. You can see the Pope depicted here in this other etching, looking most disappointed as Napoleon places the crown on his head. And it was also a statement of Napoleon's belief in the power of meritocracy, that anyone should be able to make it to the peak of the system. It was also, in this moment, a rejection of the divine right of kings. Napoleon is saying when he crowns himself that he needs no God to crown him. He does not need the approval of the church to be the monarch. For the first time, a monarch is crowned by himself, a true statement of the revolutionary ideas of meritocracy, that people should be able to rise to the top regardless of their status. Interesting, as we've said before, this moment in 1804 represents a return to the monarchy at the end of a revolution, which was about removing monarchical power. After this event, Napoleon goes on to fight in a series of wars known as the Napoleonic Wars. A monument to those wars was built in downtown Paris, and in 1840 it opened in time for the official state funeral of Napoleon. And that is the building of the Arc de Triomphe on the Champs-Élysées. And if you go to Paris today, it's still there. It's a monument to French soldiers in the Grande Armée de Napoleon that fought in the Napoleonic Wars, and particularly in a battle called Austerlitz, which we won't go into here. Some people actually consider the Napoleonic Wars, in which Napoleon fought the great powers of Europe and conquered most of them, they consider that actually the true First World War, before the one we talk about at the start of the 20th century. The wars saw a dividing of Europe and two great rivals rising. We see Britain, represented by the Duke of Wellington wearing red here, and Napoleon carving up the world between them, until a grand clash came between them at the famous Battle of Waterloo, in which Napoleon's troops were defeated by the British Duke of Wellington. So, finally, Napoleon is defeated in battle, in 1815, after a long series of wars. Napoleon's disappointment was obvious. His great enemy, the Duke of Wellington, had won these wars, and this is remembered in popular culture. We remember the Duke of Wellington, the Iron Duke, through Wellington boots, wellies, as we can see worn by Paddington Bear. He's also remembered in the dish called Beef Wellington, basically beef, roast beef, inside a pastry cover. So Duke of Wellington is largely remembered this. And Napoleon, of course, is remembered in the opening lines of the ABBA song Waterloo, named after his battle. Someone asked me recently, was I making that up? And no, it's absolutely true. Napoleon dies under British guard in 1821 on St. Helena Island in the South Atlantic Ocean. And you can see just how isolated this is. There was a great fear that he would come back to France all the way up here and start his wars again. So under an armed guard, and perhaps being slowly poisoned by his guards, Napoleon dies in obscurity. And it's very much mocked by the British press at the time. He's depicted as a little bit like a castaway on a tiny island. Here he is, in the middle of nowhere, almost drawn like a miserable sans-culotte. His grave, however, is marked by a tomb in the Hôtel des Invalides, a military hospital in downtown Paris. His body was taken there in 1840 via the Arc de Triomphe. And you can see the size of his casket, if you like his coffin, compared to the people standing around it. Invalides we've spoken of before. This was the location in the July days of 1789 where the French had raided the military stores and taken weapons before they attacked the Bastille. So Napoleon still truly is at the heart of the French Revolution. He's the finishing point of the French Revolution, and it raises the question, did his ideas live on? Did the revolutionary ideas live on? What is the outcome of the French Revolution in our lives today?